This special lecture, titled Pareidolia in Astronomy, Why Are So Many Entities Named for Things That Do Not Exist?, is roughly divided into three parts: stellar and galactic examples, nebular examples, and solar system examples. Due to pareidolia, the psychological phenomenon in which the mind responds to a stimulus by perceiving a familiar pattern where none exists, astronomical images of small asteroids, strange stars, the interstellar medium, galaxies, and superclusters have triggered associations with unrelated entities. Incorporation of the unrelated names enables us to communicate quickly, as the spoken or written word creates an image in the mind. Many astronomical objects are named with spookiness and Halloween. The amazing thing with Halloween pareidolia is that often that familiar patterns have no physical existence in the first place. The tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern, related to our ability to see patterns in partial data as a survival mechanism. The woman in the moon, the man in the moon, the rabbit in the moon. The heart of Pluto. Some see a dog. Humans see faces in many things. More than just faces, but parts of bodies. And more than just human faces. And more than just humans generally. Pareidolia is found in more than images. Sounds, called Whistler waves, are found due to magnetospheric activity. Pareidolia is associated with making associations called spurious correlations, where unrelated trends are correlated over a short period of time. A couple quotes from artists, philosophers, and astronomers discuss pareidolia. Neil deGrasse Tyson calls optical illusions brain failures. Leonardo da Vinci is quoted saying, "If you look at any walls spotted with various stains or with a mixture of different kinds of stones, if you are about to invent some scene, you will be able to see in it a resemblance to various different landscapes adorned with mountains, rivers, rocks, trees, plains, wide valleys, and various groups of hills." David Hume is quoted saying there is an universal tendency among mankind to conceive all beings like themselves, and to transfer to every object those qualities with which they are familiarly acquainted, and of which they are intimately conscious. We find human faces in the moon, armies in the clouds, and by a natural propensity, if not corrected by experience and reflection, ascribe malice or goodwill to everything that hurts or pleases us. In his 1995 book The Demon-Haunted World: Science as a Candle in the Dark, Carl Sagan argued that this ability to recognize faces from a distance or in poor visibility was an important survival technique. While this instinct enables humans to instantly judge whether an oncoming person is a friend or foe, Sagan noted that it could result in some misinterpretation of random images or patterns of light and shade as being faces. German design studio Onformative is undertaking perhaps the world's largest and most systematic search for pareidolia. Their Google Faces program is performing pattern matching to find face-like shapes in Google Maps. Face pareidolia in the rhesus monkey. Jessica Taubert 4, correspondence information about the author Jessica. Susan G. Wardle. Molly Flessert. David A. Leopold. Leslie G. Ungerlater. 4LEAD Contact. Published online, August 10, 2017. Face pareidolia is not a uniquely human-specific trait or experience. In 2017, Jessica Taubert and her collaborators published their findings of pareidolia in monkeys. Eye movements reveal rhesus monkeys perceive illusory faces on inanimate objects. Monkeys consistently fixate on the illusory internal features, eyes and mouth. Pareidolia is driven by a mechanism highly tolerant of variation in visual features. German design studio Onformative is undertaking perhaps the world's largest and most systematic search for pareidolia. Their Google Faces program performs pattern matching to find face-like shapes in Google Maps. Aspects of pareidolia may lead us to understand why we associate unrelated, and sometimes imaginary entities, to the physical world. Pareidolia is most often associated with seeing faces similar to human faces associated with survival. Some researchers have argued that our attraction to sparkles, mirages, is associated with survival need to find water. We find pareidolia exists with simulations of images, sounds, visualizations of data, and behavior. It is not unique to humans, and has been studied in other social species. Pareidolia in artificial intelligence is sometimes called a false detection. The historical constellation patterns are due to pareidolia. For example, ancient people imagined the constellation Orion to be a mighty hunter. They envisioned a night sky full of animals and gods that interacted. They told elaborate stories about these constellation entities. Did you know? Ancient peoples regarded 8 major seasonal subdivisions of every year. They include the March and September equinoxes, the June and December solstices, and the intervening 4 cross-quarter days, each marking the beginning of a new season. In modern times, the 4 cross-quarter days are often called Groundhog Day, February 2nd, May Day, May 1st, Lammas, August 1st, and Halloween, October 31st. The true cross-quarter day falls on November 7th, representing a difference from our modern fixed date for Halloween. Halloween, or All Hallows' Eve, originated from the ancient Celtic and Druid sacred festival called Samhain, meaning summer's end. It was the day when the cattle were brought in from pasture, those needed for the winter's supply of meat would be slaughtered. Many historians believe that it served as the start of the new year in the Celtic calendar. Since October 31st was the death night of the old year, it came to be associated with ghosts and graveyards. Samhain is believed to coincide with the day that the Pleiades star cluster culminates, that is, climbs to its highest point in the sky, at midnight. Underscoring the ancient nature of this holiday, some anthropologists believe this Lascaux cave painting created about 16,500 years ago is of the constellation Taurus, showing the Pleiades star cluster in the upper right. http://www.mazzaroth.com/Ch14/lascauxcave.htm. Lammas Day is a holiday celebrated in some English-speaking countries in the Northern Hemisphere, usually between August 1st and September 1st. It is a festival to mark the annual wheat harvest, and is the first harvest festival of the year. About 90 light-years away in the constellation Perseus is an intriguing star named Algol, and common known as the Demon Star. The name Algol, related the word ghoul, derives from the Arabic phrase head of the ogre. It is the first, and best known, eclipsing binary stars, known as Algol variables. Algol's apparent magnitude is usually near constant at 2.1, but regularly dips to 3.4 every 2.86 days, 2 days, 20 hours and 49 minutes, during the roughly 10-hour-long partial eclipses. The image in the upper right shows that during the primary eclipse, at right, the larger but dimmer companion star, a K2 orange subgiant, partially eclipses Algol A, a more massive but smaller main sequence star. A small secondary eclipse, left, is observed when the B star passes around the back of the primary. Mike Guidry / University of Tennessee. http://www.skyantelescope.com/astronomy-blogs/behold-algol-star-secret. Many cultures in ancient times associated Algol was associated with bloody violence. Ptolemy referred to Algol as the Gorgon of Perseus and associated with death by decapitation, just as Perseus defeated the snake-headed Gorgon called Medusa. The ancients regarded Algol as one of the unluckiest stars in the sky, and it was one of the 15 Behenian stars, which are stars that were chosen by medieval astrologers for magical applications. Perseus figure https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Perseus. As Hurricane Matthew intensified into a Category 5 storm in 2016, the tempest also produced vibrant colors in the sky. The rare atmospheric phenomena, known as lighting sprites, were photographed by an observer about 400 miles southwest of Puerto Rico. For many years, pilots didn't report seeing sprites out of fear of being considered insane. Evidence of sprites is so rare, the phenomenon was thought to be a myth until it was photographed by a pilot in 1989. Perhaps the biggest source of Halloween images are from nebulae. There are 4 broad classes of nebula: planetary, supernova, diffuse, and dark. Planetary nebulae and supernova remnants result from the death of stars. When a low-mass star, such as our Sun, enters the final stage of its life, it enters its red giant phase and slowly loses its outer layers due to helium flashes in their interior. When the star has lost enough material, its temperature increases and the UV radiation it emits ionizes the surrounding material it has thrown off. The star continues to undergo mass loss, emitting a circumstellar shell of hydrogen gas which is both heated by the interior star so that it emits infrared radiation and reflects the visible radiation from the star. Eventually the star collapses to its final stage of being a white dwarf, where it will cool over billions of years. Planetary nebula got their name because they are round, planet-shaped, and faint. Researchers initially thought they were related to gas giants like Jupiter. Over time, it became evident that planetary nebulae are not related to planets at all, but instead are created at the end of a Sun-like star's life as its outer layers expand into space while the star's core shrinks to become a white dwarf. High-mass stars, generally greater than 8 solar masses, burn quickly, live shorter lives, and have a violent death ending as a supernovae explosion catastrophically blowing off their external layers. This explosion leaves behind a remnant in the form of a compact object such as a neutron star and a spectacular cloud of gas and dust that is ionized by the energy of the explosion. Most nebulae are diffuse nebula, meaning they have no distinct boundaries. There are 2 main types of diffuse nebula: emission and reflection. Most light from reflection are from reflected light from nearby stars. Emission nebulae are those that emit radiation at discrete spectral line from ionized gases. The most common lines are hydrogen, as these clouds are largely composed of ionized hydrogen, and thus are referred to as high regions. Finally, dark nebulae are opaque clouds that do not emit visible radiation and are not illuminated by stars, but rather emit in longer wavelengths of infrared and radio-electromagnetic region. They block light from luminous objects behind them. One more older class of nebula was the spiral nebula. With better telescopes and understanding, these are now known as galaxies. First, a short catalogue of scary objects to get you started thinking about this phenomena. Snakes on a plane. The Milky Way galactic plane, that is. This snake is a dark nebula. Dark clouds along the plane of the Milky Way galaxy mask the most distant stars from our view. The snake is an ideal place to hunt for massive forming stars as they have not had time to heat up and destroy the cloud they are born in, said Dr. Ch14, also known as Drive Scary, of NASA's Spitzer Science Center. The snake is located about 11,000 light-years away in the constellation Sagittarius. A snake-like object in the Milky Way galaxy. Image credit, NASA/JPL Caltech. https://www.jpl.nasa.gov/news/news.php. Feature equals 121. Discovered by John Herschel in 1835, NGC 2207 and IC 2163 are a pair of colliding spiral galaxies about 80 million light-years away in the constellation Canis Major. The larger is an intermediate spiral galaxy and the smaller is a barred spiral galaxy that shows stress and pulling of its arms due to tidal forces of the collision interaction. Accelerated rates of star formation are taking place, and 4 supernovas have been identified. The Pleiades, an open cluster consisting of approximately 3,000 000 stars at a distance of about 444 light-years from Earth in the constellation of Taurus. It is also known as the Seven Sisters, or the astronomical designations NGC 1432/35 and M45. The ghost-like image on the right shows the eerie, wispy tendrils of a dark interstellar cloud being destroyed by the passage of one of the brightest stars in the Pleiades star cluster. This reflection nebulae is the result of light from the star reflecting off the surface of pitch-black clouds of cold gas laced with dust.
https://asd.gsfc.nasa.gov/blueshift/index.php/2011/1031/Maggie's blog Spooky Astronomy Part 2/ The origin of the term grinning like a Cheshire cat is not known. Many ideas abound. Lewis Carroll used the name Cheshire Cat for one of the characters in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. A Cheshire moon, reference to Lewis Carroll, is when the horns of the crescent moon point up at an angle, away from the horizon, so the moon's crescent takes on the appearance of a bowl or a smile. A radar image of asteroid 2015 TB145, about 600 m in diameter, was captured using the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico on October 30, 2015, as it was just 1.27 lunar distances from Earth. NASA says it is likely to be a dead comet. The magnetic field of the solar wind interacts with Earth's intrinsic magnetic field, pulling field lines to the shadow side where the magnetic field is stretched to 120 Earth radiuses away from the Sunday. The process results in an electric current across the tail. On Earth, the intensified veils of aurora result from geomagnetic substorms, the reconnection of field lines resulting from a substorm current wedge interrupting the strong cross-tail current. The field line depolarization produces energized particles that precipitate into the ionosphere. The interaction of the energized particles and the ions through electron recombination and other processes produces the auroral light. The colors of the ghostly veiled aurora reveal their altitude since the chemical composition of the upper atmosphere is highly stratified. Red. Excited high-altitude atomic oxygen emits at 630.0 nm, red. Green. At lower altitudes the more frequent collisions suppress the 630.0 nm, red, atomic oxygen mode, rather the 557.7 nm emission, green, dominates. Fairly high concentration of atomic oxygen and higher eye sensitivity in green make green auroras the most common. The excited molecular nitrogen, atomic nitrogen being rare due to high stability of the N2 molecule, plays a role here, as it can transfer energy by collision to an oxygen atom, which then radiates it away at the green wavelength. Red and green can also mix together to produce pink or yellow hues. The rapid decrease of concentration of atomic oxygen below about 100 km is responsible for the abrupt-looking end of the lower edges of the curtains. Both the 557.7 and 630.0 nm wavelengths correspond to forbidden transitions of atomic oxygen, slow mechanism that is responsible for the graduality, 0.7s and 107s respectively, of flaring and fading. Blue. At lowest altitudes, molecular nitrogen and ionized molecular nitrogen dominate throughout the spectrum of visible light emission with 428 nm, blue, being the largest component. Blue and purple emissions, at the lower edges of the curtains, appear during highest levels of solar activity. This leering face is due to distortions of space-time. Images like this were predicted by Albert Einstein's general relativity decades before being discovered. Gravitational lensing is the bending of light around a massive object due to its distortion of space-time. Time dilation results in frequency shifts. Light towards a gravity well is blue shifted, out of a gravity well it is red shifted. Gravitational redshift has been measured in the laboratory and using astronomical observations. Time dilation is detected, for example, in global positioning satellites. Let's recall the reason for this shifting of light.
Einstein's equivalence principle states that it is impossible to tell, from within a closed system, whether one is in a gravitational field, or accelerating. According to general relativity, objects in a gravitational field behave similarly to objects within an accelerating enclosure. In both cases, a ball will fall to the ground at 9.8 m/s2. Consider two rockets motionless with respect to each other, as in Figure 1. If a light beam enters the rocket 2 meters above the floor, it strikes the far wall 2 meters above the floor. In Figure 2, the rocket on the right is moving past the rocket on the left at a constant velocity. The beam of light strikes the far wall lower than entering but follows a straight line path across the room. In Figure 3, the rocket on the right is moving past the rocket on the left, but it is accelerating, its speeds is increasing. The beam of light will again strike the wall lower than 2 meters, but in this accelerating frame, it will follow a curved path. But according to the equivalence principle, we cannot tell the difference between an accelerated frame of reference and a gravitational field. Therefore, if a beam of light bends in an accelerating frame, then a beam of light must bend in a gravitational field. This is called gravitational lensing. Gravitational lensing is the bending of light around a massive object due to its distortion of space-time. Time dilation results in frequency shifts. Light towards a gravity well is blue shifted, out of a gravity well it is red shifted. Gravitational redshift has been measured in the laboratory and using astronomical observations. Time dilation is seen in global positioning satellites. Solar eclipses offer an opportunity to confirm Einstein's general theory of relativity. During an eclipse, stars very close to the solar disk could be imaged with a telescope and photographic plates. Would they be shifted from the expected positions found in observations at night? In 1920, Eddington sent 2 teams to observe an eclipse. The South American team did not get high-quality enough data to use due to problems with the telescope. The Principe team, though experiencing cloudy weather, was able to create a few photographic plates of the eclipse showing the star positions. Eddington was able to confirm Einstein's theory, which made Einstein a household name. It has been suggested that Eddington faked his analysis to purposefully verify Einstein's general relativity. A reanalysis in 1979 showed that while the original photographic plates were of poor quality, Eddington was justified in claiming he was able to verify Einstein's theory. Further, better data were obtained at eclipses in 1922 and 1929, concluding to the correctness of general relativity. This leering face is due to distortions of space-time. Images like this were predicted by Albert Einstein's general relativity decades before being discovered. This leering face is due to distortions of space-time. Images like this were predicted by Albert Einstein's general relativity decades before being discovered. Gravitational lensing is the bending of light around a massive object due to its distortion of space-time. Time dilation results in frequency shifts. Light towards a gravity well is blue shifted, out of a gravity well it is red shifted. Gravitational redshift has been measured in the laboratory and using astronomical observations. Time dilation is detected, for example, in global positioning satellites. Gravitational lensing is the bending of light around a massive object due to its distortion of space-time. Time dilation results in frequency shifts. Light towards a gravity well is blue shifted, out of a gravity well it is red shifted. Gravitational redshift has been measured in the laboratory and using astronomical observations. Time dilation is detected, for example, in global positioning satellites. About 1,400 light-years away in constellation Cepheus, there appears to be a star that wandered into a molecular cloud, based on their having very different velocities. Near the edge of a large molecular cloud, pockets of interstellar dust in the region block light from background stars or scatter light from the embedded bright star, giving parts of the nebula a characteristic blue color. The dim red glow is thought to be due to stars' ultraviolet light producing luminescence in the nebular dust. This region spans 7 light-years. Or it looks like a sock puppet. Mimas, moon orbiting Saturn, was discovered in 1789, not after Star Wars Death Star images were made despite pop legends. The mysterious temperatures on Mimas are not yet fully understood. Mimas, moon orbiting Saturn, was discovered in 1789, not after Star Wars Death Star images were made despite pop legends. The mysterious temperatures on Mimas are not yet fully understood. See if you see what astronomers saw in these images. This nebula is about 20-30 light-years away in the constellation Ursa Major. Planetary nebulas were first so named because they are round and faint like a planetary disk. Today, astronomers know that these nebulas form when a dying sun-like star runs out of hydrogen fuel, first expands to be a red giant, and then collapses to become a white dwarf ejecting its outer envelope. The expelled gas and dust are heated by the central, dense white dwarf and will glow while dispersing over the next several thousand years. The white dwarf itself is no longer a star since it is no longer fusing hydrogen. It will cool and fade over several billion years. Planetary nebulas and white dwarfs show us what the Sun's evolutionary fate will most likely be. The nebula is estimated to be 8,000 years old, expanding at a velocity in the range from 27 to 39 km per second, and being about 0.13 solar masses. The chemical composition includes hydrogen, helium, nitrogen, oxygen and sulfur. The matter within the nebula has a density of less than 100 particles per cubic centimeter. The Owl Nebula about 20-30 light-years away in the constellation Ursa Major. Planetary nebulas were first so named because they are round and faint like a planetary disk. Today, astronomers know that these nebulas form when a dying sun-like star runs out of hydrogen fuel, first expands to be a red giant, and then collapses to become a white dwarf ejecting its outer envelope. The expelled gas and dust are heated by the central, dense white dwarf and will glow while dispersing over the next several thousand years. The white dwarf itself is no longer a star since it is no longer fusing hydrogen. It will cool and fade over several billion years. Planetary nebulas and white dwarfs show us what the Sun's evolutionary fate will most likely be. The nebula is estimated to be 8,000 years old, expanding at a velocity in the range from 27 to 39 km per second, and being about 0.13 solar masses. The chemical composition includes hydrogen, helium, nitrogen, oxygen and sulfur. The matter within the nebula has a density of less than 100 particles per cubic centimeter. Our nearly edge-on view of galaxy NGC 5866 about 44 million light-years away Indiana the Draco constellation results in a crisp dust lane dividing this galaxy into two halves giving the needle-like appearance of a sharp spindle shape much like the one on the spinning wheel the evil witch Maleficent used to poison Aurora in the story Sleeping Beauty. This galaxy has diameter of roughly 60,000 light-years, 2/3 of Milky Way, but roughly the same mass and about 100 billion stars. With its apparent magnitude of 10.7 and size of 4.7 by 1.9 arc-minutes it is included in Messie's catalogue, M102. This Hubble image of NGC 5866 is a combination of blue, green and red observations taken with the advanced camera for surveys in February 2006. Image, NASA, ESA, and the Hubble Heritage Team, STSI/Aura. Our nearly edge-on view of galaxy NGC 5866 about 44 million light-years away Indiana the Draco constellation results in a crisp dust lane dividing this galaxy into two halves giving the needle-like appearance of a sharp spindle shape much like the one on the spinning wheel the evil witch Maleficent used to poison Aurora in the story Sleeping Beauty. This galaxy has diameter of roughly 60,000 light-years, 2/3 of Milky Way, but roughly the same mass and about 100 billion stars. With its apparent magnitude of 10.7 and size of 4.7 by 1.9 arc-minutes, it is included in MESSI's catalogue, M102. This Hubble image of NGC 5866 is a combination of blue, green and red observations taken with the advanced camera for surveys in February 2006. Image, NASA, ESA, and the Hubble Heritage Team, STSI/AURA. On a bigger scale, consider galaxies. About 24 million light-years away in the constellation Coma Berenices, lies the Black Eye Galaxy. Such spiral galaxies have about 100 million stars. The Black Eye appearance results from a spectacular dark band of absorbing dust in front of its bright nucleus. Detailed studies in the 1990s led to the remarkable discovery that the interstellar gas in the outer regions rotate in the opposite direction from the gas and stars in the inner regions. Active formation of new stars is occurring in the shear region where the oppositely rotating gases collide, are compressed, and contract. Astronomers believe that the oppositely rotating gas arose when the Black Eye Galaxy absorbed a satellite galaxy that collided with it, perhaps more than 1 billion years ago. Black Eye Galaxy, aka Evil Eye Galaxy. This nebula is about 1,600 light-years away in the constellation Cetus. The gas is expelled from a dying solar-like star over thousands of years. The cloud is interacting with the local interstellar dust and gas. The star that died is the smaller of the binary system at the center of the nebula. It is entering its final stage of stellar evolution, becoming a white dwarf. It is known as the Skull Nebula. This cluster is about 2,610 to 2,930 light-years away in the constellation Cancer. This open cluster has an apparent magnitude of 6.1 and an apparent size diameter of 30 arc-minutes, roughly the size of the Moon in the sky. As one of the oldest open clusters, it is from 3.2 to 5 billion years. The average age of a star in the cluster is 4 billion years, roughly the age of the Solar System, and hence, our Sun. Open clusters this age typically have dispersed. Stars there have about the same metallicity as the Sunday. With over 500 stars, more than 100 solar-like stars, and many red giants, the cluster's mass is estimated to be 1,080 to 1,400 solar masses. In spite of being one of the most studied objects of its kind, its basic properties, mass, age, number of stars of different types vary considerably from one source to the next. Thus far, simulations do not show it as a potential source of the Sunday. This is the King Cobra cluster. Some of those bright stars are like those cobra eyes. This nebula is about 2,000,5,000 light-years away in the constellation Ophiuchus. The transformed white dwarf star, seen near the center, radiates strongly at ultraviolet wavelengths and powers the expanding nebula's glow. The nebula's main ring structure is about a light-year across, and the glow from ionized oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen atoms are colored blue, green, and red respectively. It is called the Little Ghost Nebula. The Little Ghost Nebula offers a glimpse of the fate of our Sun, which could produce its own planetary nebula only about 5 billion years from now. About 1,400 light-years away in the constellation Hydra, is a planetary nebula of a Sun-like star that, while dying, stripped of layers of its outer atmosphere evidences by the bright rings. Now a bright central white dwarf, it heats the nebula with UV light. In this image, infrared light at wavelengths of 3.6 microns is rendered in blue, 4.5 microns in green, and 8.0 microns in red. Thus the coolest parts are red and the hottest parts of white and blue. The concentric rings inspired the name for NGC 3242 to be the Ghost of Jupiter Nebula. This nebula is about 3,300 light-years away in the constellation Draco. This planetary nebula formed as gas was ejected from a dying star as it transitions into its white dwarf phase. The rings show ejection took place in several phases, with the outermost faint halo being 60,
000 years old and the bright inner portions about 1000 years old. It is called the Cat's Eye Nebula. This was the first planetary nebula studied with spectroscopy by William Herschel. He discovered green oxygen emission lines, now known to be common in planetary nebula. This planetary nebula, the end of a star's life, shows supersonic shock waves formed by the compression and subsequent heating of plasma as it rapidly expands, expelling heavier elements manufactured in the star to eventually be recycled when new stars are formed from nebular collapse. Of the Red Spider Nebula, Apod writes, "Oh, what a tangled web a planetary nebula can weave." The Red Spider planetary nebula shows the complex structure that can result when a normal star ejects its outer gases and becomes a white dwarf star. Officially tagged NGC 6537, this two-lobed symmetric planetary nebula houses one of the hottest white dwarfs ever observed, probably as part of binary star system. Internal winds emanating from the central stars, visible in the center, have been measured in excess of 1000 km per second. These winds expand the nebula, flow along the nebula's walls, and cause waves of hot gas and dust to collide. Atoms caught in these colliding shocks radiate light shown in the above representative color picture. The Red Spider Nebula lies toward the constellation of Sagittarius. Its distance is not well known but estimated by some to be about 4,000 light-years. About 7,000 light-years away in the constellation Aquila there is a pale planetary nebula. The white dwarf central star has released its former atmosphere, and now illuminates it with UV light, creating an eerie glowing cloud. It is very faint and magnitude 11, with the size of about 6 arcsec. It is easy to see why it is known as the Phantom Streak Nebula. HST clearly shows the fluorescent shrouds of gas ejected from a dying solar-like star about 6,500 light-years away in the constellation Aquila. The glowing eye is a planetary nebula about 6,500 light-years away in the constellation Aquila. Hubble Space Telescope imagery clearly shows the fluorescent shrouds of gas ejected from a dying solar-like star. About 650 light-years away in the constellation of Aquarius, is another spectacular planetary nebula. On the left is the infrared image showing the zombie star, and on the right is the supernova remnant in visible light. About 650 light-years away in the constellation of Aquarius, a low-mass star, like the Sun, died producing the mesmerizing Helix planetary nebula. When the hydrogen fuel for the fusion reaction runs out, a star turns to helium for a fuel source, burning it into an even heavier mix of carbon, nitrogen and oxygen. Eventually, the helium will also be exhausted, and a low-mass star dies, puffing off its outer gaseous layers and leaving behind the tiny, hot, dense core, called a white dwarf. White dwarfs are zombie stars. They are no longer hot enough to have fusion reactions, but they emit light while they cool over billions of years. The white dwarf is about the size of Earth, but has a mass very close to that of the original star. In fact, a teaspoon of a white dwarf has the same mass as few elephants. The Sun will expand into a planetary nebula when it dies in about 5 billion years. This nebula is about 8,000 light-years away in the constellation Musca. Shows different shells of elements being expelled from the dying star, in this case helium, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Discovered by human computers Annie Jump Cannon and Margaret W. Mayall during their work on an extended Henry Draper catalog. Discovered by human computers Annie Jump Cannon and Margaret W. Mayall during their work on an extended Henry Draper catalog, 1918 and 1924. The Hourglass Planetary Nebula is about 8,000 light-years away in the constellation Musca. This colorized image was taken with the Wide Field and Planetary Camera 2 aboard NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. The image shows different shells of elements being expelled from the dying star, in this case helium, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Believed to be a supernova remnant, IC 2118 is about 900 light-years away in the constellation Eridanus. It is a very faint reflection nebula, illuminated by the supergiant star Rigel in Orion.
Substantial carbon monoxide emission throughout parts of IC2118 evidenced in radio observations indicate of the presence of molecular clouds and star formation. That which can find her broom here 1,400 light-years away in the constellation Cygnus. This supernova remnant is colorful because of excitations due to collisions of gas particles as it expands. Its apparent size is over 3x the size of the Moon, thus 35 light-years in extent. This nebula is made from bubbles being formed in opposing directions by outflows from its massive nest of baby stars. Linda Vu of the Spitzer Science Center wrote the following about the Black Widow Nebula. Unsuspecting prey be warned. Hiding in the darkest corner of the constellation Circinus is a gigantic black widow spider waiting for its next meal. For decades, this galactic creepy crawler has remained largely invisible, cunningly escaping visible light detection. At last, it has finally been caught by NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope's dust-piercing, infrared eyes. The spider is actually a star-forming cloud of gas and dust. In this spooky Halloween image, an hourglass-shaped insignia, typically found on the underbelly of a black widow spider, can be seen faintly in the visible light image from Digital Sky Survey, DSS. As Spitzer's infrared image fades in, the veil of galactic dust shrouding the rest of the spider is lifted to reveal a poisonous widow. In the Spitzer image, the two opposing bubbles that make up the Black Widow's body are being formed in opposite directions by the powerful outflows from massive groups of forming stars. The baby stars can be seen inside the widow's stomach where the two bubbles meet. When individual stars form from molecular clouds of gas and dust, they produce intense radiation and very strong particle winds. Both the radiation and the stellar winds blow the dust outward from the star, creating a cavity or bubble. In the case of the Black Widow Nebula, astronomers suspect that a large cloud of gas and dust condensed to create multiple clusters of massive star formation. The combined winds from these large stars probably blew out bubbles into the direction of least resistance, forming a double bubble. About 170,000 light-years away in the constellation Dorado is a star-forming region and emission nebula. Two bright regions, named A1, left, and A2, right, are very hot, glowing blobs of hydrogen and oxygen. The bubble in A1 is produced by the hot, intense radiation and powerful stellar wind from a single massive star. A2 has a more complex appearance due to the presence of more dust, and it contains several hidden, massive stars. The massive stars in A1 and A2 must have formed within the last 10,000 years, since their natal gas shrouds are not yet disrupted by the powerful radiation of the newly born stars. The Ghost Head Nebula is about 170,000 light-years away in the constellation Dorado. It is a star-forming region and emission nebula. Two bright regions, the eyes of the ghost, named A1, left, and A2, right, are very hot, glowing blobs of hydrogen and oxygen. The bubble in A1 is produced by the hot, intense radiation and powerful stellar wind from a single massive star. A2 has a more complex appearance due to the presence of more dust, and it contains several hidden, massive stars. The massive stars in A1 and A2 must have formed within the last 10,000 years, since their natal gas shrouds are not yet disrupted by the powerful radiation of the newly born stars. 2,000 light-years away in the constellation Aquila, two neighboring dark nebulae with high opacity conspire to create the letter E with an apparent size of about that of the full moon and render a good show in 10x50 binoculars. Join Barnard 143, top, and its neighbor Barnard 142 to make the letter E. Both prominent dark nebulae lay around 3 degrees northwest of Altair in Aquila. It is sometimes referred to as the E is for Evil Dark Nebula. About 5,500 light-years away in the constellation Scorpius there is an emission nebula with a red color that originates from an abundance of ionized hydrogen atoms. Stars nearly 10 solar masses about 1 million years old are found here. George Varoufakis, who created the picture, writes that nebulas are perhaps as famous for being identified with familiar shapes as cats are for getting into trouble. Still, no known cat could have created the vast Cat's Paw Nebula visible in Scorpius. At 500 light-years distant, Cat's Paw is an emission nebula with a red color that originates from an abundance of ionized hydrogen atoms. Alternatively known as the Bear Claw Nebula or NGC 6334, stars nearly 10 times the mass of our Sun have been born there in only the past few million years. Pictured here is a deep-field image of the Cat's Paw Nebula in light emitted by hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. About 1,200 light-years away in the constellation Cepheus. This reflection nebula is illuminated by its embedded stars. The dust is not luminous. This is a close-up view of the Ghost Head Nebula. The entire Ghost Nebula is over 2 light-years across, that is about half the distance from the Sun to the nearest star system, Alpha Centauri. At about 7,000 light-years away in constellation Cepheus, this active star-forming region spans 100 light-years. The Wizard Nebula is an open cluster discovered by Caroline Herschel in 1787. Over time, a planetary nebula drifts away from the dead star and becomes part of the interstellar media. The Death Eater Nebula is about 650–1630 light-years away in the constellation Serpens. It formed about 45,000 years ago when solar-like star died, collapsing into a white dwarf. This region contains quite a bit of ionized oxygen atoms, pictured in blue, while the diffuse orange emission is the result of the nebula's journey through the disk of our galaxy. At the center, in the blue haze, is the star responsible for the nebula's existence. The Egg Nebula is about 3,000 light-years away in the constellation Cygnus. Its peculiar properties were first described in 1975 using data from the 11M survey obtained with sounding rocket by Air Force Geophysical Laboratory, AFGL, in 1971 to 1974. Previously, the object was catalogued by Fritz Zwicky as a pair of galaxies. Looks a bit like an X-Wing fighter from Star Wars. About 160,000 light-years away in the Large Magellanic Cloud lies an extensive, extremely luminous star-forming region that was determined to originate from the violent explosion of a massive star. Known as the Tarantula Nebula, this high region has a radius of about 190 light-years. A molecular cloud about 1,500 light-years away in the Orion constellation. Active star-forming region. Over 100 known kinds of organic and inorganic gases as well as dust. Pinkish glow originates from hydrogen gas predominantly behind the nebula, ionized by the nearby bright star Sigma Orionis. Magnetic fields channel the gases leaving the nebula into streams, shown as streaks in the background glow. The Horsehead Nebula is a molecular cloud about 1,500 light-years away in the Orion constellation. It houses an active star-forming region with over 100 known kinds of organic and inorganic gases as well as dust. Its pinkish glow originates from hydrogen gas predominantly behind the nebula, ionized by the nearby bright star Sigma Orionis. Magnetic fields channel the gases leaving the nebula into streams, shown as streaks in the background glow. The Orion Nebula Complex is an extremely large collection of nebulae. About 1,500 light-years away in the constellation Orion is a mysterious hole in the Orion Nebula. The cause of the hole is not completely understood. It has been hypothesized that narrow jets of gas from young stars in the region punctured the sheet of dust and gas, as well as powerful radiation from a nearby mature star may have helped to create the hole. Researchers believe this discovery should lead to a better understanding of the entire star-forming process. It is called the Spectre of Death Nebula. The Crab Nebula is a supernova remnant about 6,500 light-years away in the constellation Taurus. Japanese and Chinese astronomers recorded this violent event nearly 1,000 years ago in 1054. In the Hubble Space Telescope image, the orange filaments are mostly hydrogen. The rapidly spinning neutron star embedded in the center of the nebula is the dynamo powering the nebula's eerie interior bluish glow. The blue light comes from electrons whirling at nearly the speed of light around magnetic field lines from the neutron star. The neutron star, like a lighthouse, ejects twin beams of radiation that appear to pulse 30 times a second due to the neutron star's rotation. A neutron star is the crushed ultra-dense core of the exploded star. This animation from NASA's Space Telescope Institute starts with a composite image of the Crab Nebula, a supernova remnant that was assembled by combining data from 5 telescopes spanning nearly the entire breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum: the Very Large Array, the Spitzer Space Telescope, the Hubble Space Telescope, the XMM Newton Observatory, and the Chandra X-ray Observatory. The video dissolves to the red-colored radio-light view that shows how a neutron star's fierce wind of charged particles from the central neutron star energized the nebula, causing it to emit the radio waves. The yellow-colored infrared image includes the glow of dust particles absorbing ultraviolet and visible light. The green-colored Hubble visible light image offers a very sharp view of hot filamentary structures that permeate this nebula. The blue-colored ultraviolet image and the purple-colored X-ray image shows the effect of an energetic cloud of electrons driven by a rapidly rotating neutron star at the center of the nebula. This rendition of the Crab Nebula shows the rapidly spinning pulsar region in the center reminiscent of the telltale heart. The heart is the crushed core of a long-dead star, called a neutron star, which exploded as a supernova and is now still beating with rhythmic precision. Evidence of its heartbeat are rapid-fire, lighthouse-like pulses of energy from the fast-spinning neutron star. The stellar relic is embedded in the center of the Crab Nebula, the expanding, tattered remains of the doomed star. Pulsar B1509-58 is about 17,000 light-years away in the constellation of Circinus, discovered by the Einstein X-ray Observatory in 1982. It is powered by the leftover, dense core of a star that blew up in a supernova explosion about 1,700 years ago. Red represents low-energy X-rays, the medium range is green, and the most energetic ones are colored blue. The blue hand-like structure was created by energy emanating from the nebula around the dying star PSR B1509-58. The red areas are from a neighboring gas cloud called RCW89. The stellar corpse, called PSR B1509-58, is a pulsar. It rapidly spins around, 7 times per second, firing out a particle wind into the material around it, material that was ejected in the star's explosion. These particles are interacting with magnetic fields around the material, causing it to glow with X-rays. The pulsar itself can't be seen in this picture, but is located near the bright white spot. Nicknamed the Hand of God, this object is called a pulsar wind nebula. Hubble has imaged and tracked a planet orbiting the star Fomalhaut. The inset image marks the planet's positions in the years Hubble observed it, and shows the planet at its position in 2012. The planet orbits near the inner edge of a dust ring around the bright star. The white dot in the main image marks the location of the star, which has been blocked out by a black circular mask. Astronomers have likened it to the Eye of Sauron. Imaged by the Chandra X-ray telescope, the Screaming Skull Galaxy cluster is about 23 million light-years away. Indiana, the Perseus constellation. An X-ray photon has thousands times more energy than a visible light photon, and the photons here are not from the galaxies themselves, but rather from a 50 million degree cloud of intracluster gas, itself more massive than all the cluster's galaxies combined. Bright X-ray source hot knot is between the eye socket regions, bubble voids. Above the toothless mouth, bubble void, is thought to be a supermassive black hole at the cluster center. The bubbles are blown by explosions of energetic particles ejected from the black hole and expanding into the immense gas cloud. The dark spot forming the skull's nose is an X-ray shadow of a massive galaxy falling towards the center of the cluster. This is called the Screaming Skull Galaxy cluster. The dark spot forming the skull's nose is an X-ray shadow of a massive galaxy falling towards the center of the cluster. Mars images have been a fertile ground for claims of alien structures and proof everything NASA does is staged. Though we have yet to find any aliens on Mars, NASA did discover this creepy human face on the red planet. The original face on Mars image was taken by NASA's Viking 1 orbiter, in grayscale, on July 25, 1976. It became a popular cultural sensation for decades. In the 2000 movie, Mission to Mars, with the setting of the first manned mission to Mars in 2020 ends in disaster when 3 of the crew are seemingly killed and the 4th, Luke Graham, Don Cheadle, is stranded with no way to contact Earth. He explains to rescuers that the tornado blew off all the dirt from the hill and underneath it is the face on Mars. With the Mars Global Surveyor orbiter, NASA has unmasked the face on Mars. As a rule of thumb, you can discern things in a digital image 3 times bigger than the pixel size, he added. So, if there were objects in this picture like airplanes on the ground or Egyptian-style pyramids or even small shacks, you could see what they were. Jim Garvin, chief scientist for NASA's Mars Exploration Program, 2001. The Mars Global Surveyor program acquired images that show the rock formation in greater detail, a peculiar formation of rocks, but one of many mesas in Cydonia. The Mars Orbiter Laser Altimeter, MOLA, instrument acquired high-resolution terrain elevation maps enabling the production of 3D views. In Google Earth Mars, the region features an implementation of ELIZA, an early attempt at artificial intelligence and speech recognition. Previous missions to Mars set the stage for UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists to comb the archives of Curiosity rover imagery for signs of life. The Curiosity rover on Mars scooped and tasted sand, concluding it was full of basaltic material, and then took a picture of the site. One of the rocks looked to some people like it was a squirrel that had evolved perfectly to be camouflaged with the terrain. These rocks look like they have a lizard crawling among them. But of course, lizards as we know them on Earth could not survive in the weak Martian atmosphere. More recently, a rock looking like a garden snake was spotted. UFO hunters imagined that a fossilized human finger, a thigh bone, and a coffin were in the images. And naturally the Sasquatch, which hasn't been found yet on Earth despite extensive searches, makes an apparition in Curiosity images. Before and after pictures near Curiosity clearly show the sudden appearance of a rock that bears resemblance to a jelly-filled donut. Internet went wild with people, mostly having some fun, but several became rather serious about it. Ron Joseph, who describes himself as a neuroscientist and astrobiologist, filed a lawsuit against NASA, accusing the scientists of not fully investigating the possibility of life on Mars, calling their failure to release high-resolution photos of the object recklessly negligent and bizarre. Joseph speculated that the donut was a fully grown bowl-shaped organism resembling Apothecia, which are a mixture of fungus and cyanobacteria. Upon further investigation, scientists found that it was a piece of rock that had broken off a larger rock when it was struck by Curiosity's wheels. Other works of art, statues and pyramids have been seen by avid enthusiasts. The atmosphere pressure on Earth is 100x that of Mars, which has only trace amounts of free oxygen. NASA hasn't yet explained why there appears to be a light emanating from the distant hills of Mars, but it is most likely an energetic cosmic ray particle interacting with the camera's Charged Couple Device, CCD, array. Conspiracy theorists have their own theories. And finally, a few random things. This strangely shaped nebula is not named for its strange shape. The Rotten Egg Nebula, so named for its high sulfur content, is about 5,000 light-years away in the constellation Puppis. It is a protoplanetary nebula about 1.4 light-years long. The modern use of the term Easter egg, not the holiday treat but rather a hidden joke or surprise item inserted in a piece of media, originated with Atari in 1979, when a developer snuck his name into a game hoping to get some recognition as the creator. Snip: the excellent thing about architectural Easter eggs, be they tongue-in-cheek, carved out of spite, or simply placed as a fun treat awaiting an observant eye, is that they endure in the landscape around us, becoming a sneaky and often confusing part of history. As sixth largest cathedral in the world, this stunning neo-Gothic construction is a functioning place of worship as well as a popular tourist destination. Nearly 500,000 people enter through its doors each year, many of them just to admire its breathtaking beauty. It's perhaps fitting, then, that the cathedral offers a bit of tongue-in-cheek eye candy for the dedicated architecture enthusiast, a well-hidden, but very official, carving of Star Wars villain Darth Vader perched high among its many spires. The centuries-old Gothic Cathedral of Salamanca is in Spain. Approved Easter eggs, added during restoration work in 1992, include a dragon-eating ice cream, a lynx, a bull, and a crayfish. Conspiracy theories have arisen, despite the documentation that this is a recent addition, of ancient space travel and alien interventions. There are reports of sounds from space. In May 1969, Apollo 10 astronauts, Thomas Stafford, John Young and Eugene Cernan, reported hearing strange, creepy, outer space music and haunting whistles when they were on the far side of the Moon months before Apollo 11, the first moon landing. The entire transcript of their conversation was initially classified by NASA and only released from NASA's archives in 2008, and finally the audio tapes of the conversation and sound recordings of the phenomena were declassified and released to the public in 2016. Michael Collins, the pilot of Apollo 11, who became the first person to fly around the far side of the Moon by himself while Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were walking on the surface, said he too heard an eerie woo-woo sound. NASA engineers explained that interference between the radio in the lunar module and the one in the command module created the noise. However, natural phenomena in space, usually due to charged particles interacting with a planet's magnetic field, produces these sounds all the time. In 1979, NASA's Voyager spacecraft picked up a noise near Jupiter, video, that sounds a lot like what the Apollo 10 astronauts heard orbiting the Moon. The Cassini spacecraft recorded sounds around Saturn as well, in 2002. Whistlers are electromagnetic waves in the very low frequency, VLF, spectrum produced by lighting that travel along the Earth's magnetic field lines. When lightning strikes, it generates a short-duration, broadband electromagnetic impulse. Most of the energy will travel along what's known as the Earth ionosphere waveguide as a radio-atmospheric, often spheric for short, but some of the energy escapes this waveguide and propagates into the magnetosphere along the Earth's magnetic field lines. See figures 1 and 2 for example spectrograms showing spherics and whistlers, respectively. In 1977 a 72-second-long intense radio burst recorded by Big Ear Radio Telescope at The Ohio State University famously known as the WOW signal since astronomer Jerry R. Eman found the trace on a printout and was so impressed he wrote WOW on the paper. The WOW signal coincides with the 21-centimeter line of hydrogen which researchers involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence have been interested in for a long time because it could be used for interstellar communications. The signal, or nothing like it, has never been seen again. To this day, there is no consensus on the source of the transient signal. Publications in 2015 claimed the source was a comet passage, but those findings are disputed. Some people still believe that the most likely source is extraterrestrial intelligent life. In 2015, Parkes Observatory in Australia detected mysterious intense transient radio signals known as pareidolia, but they turned out to be microwave emissions from reheating their coffee. About 11,000 light-years away in the southern constellation Norma a monster is being born. Observations of this dark cloud using the Atacama Large Millimeter/Sub-Millimeter Array, ALMA, have given astronomers the best view yet of a monstrously massive star in the process of forming. A stellar womb with over 500 times the mass than the Sun has been found and appears as the yellow blob near the center of this picture. This is the largest ever seen in the Milky Way, and it is still growing. The birth of a very brilliant star with up to 100 times the mass of the Sun is anticipated. This image combines data from ALMA and NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope, which acquires data in the infrared spectral region. Some have associated this image with the flying spaghetti monster. On a much grander scale, the Milky Way is part of a jaw-droppingly massive supercluster of galaxies that they named Laniakea. In this image, each dot is a galaxy. Each galaxy contains millions, billions, or even trillions of stars. Laniakea contains more than 100,000 galaxies and stretches 500 million light-years across. The dense region called the Great Attractor is pulling the Milky Way and many other galaxies toward forming a filament superstructure that conjures the image of cousin Itt from the Atom's family. Pareidolia is the psychological phenomenon in which the mind responds to a stimulus by perceiving a familiar pattern where none exists. Pareidolia is driven by our need to find order and meaning even when images, sounds, or general data is random or ambiguous, and most likely it is related to our ability to see patterns in partial data as a survival mechanism. Pareidolia is used in modern times to communicate about images. By making associations, we can communicate a broad range of size, shape, and color information to another person quickly and effectively by conjuring the related image in their brain. Dolphins are believed to communicate by sending picture of their echolocation signals through noises of shifted frequency. Although its astronomical origins are mostly lost in modern times, astronomical pictures continue the association of celestial entities and events with spooky and mysterious aspects of Halloween.